How to Sell a Haunted House was the second book by Grady Hendrix that I've read, and unfortunately this marks twice now that I've also been a bit disappointed with him. While I don't necessarily regret reading this book, it wasn't terrible by any stretch of the imagination, my time probably would have been served better reading something else. At least I would have enjoyed reading something else quite a lot more. This book just didn't quite hit it for me. It's pretty average-sized in length, about 419 pages. That comes out to approximately 132,500 words. It is written third-person limited in past tense, although there is one notable exception near the center of the book. It is primarily a horror story, although Grady Hendrix seems to fancy himself somewhat of a comedian as well, a comedic writer. Unfortunately for me, the comedy really didn't stick very much. I didn't find the book particularly funny, maybe a little wry from time to time. However, I didn't find it very funny, and the horror was also not particularly horrific. A few tense moments, but altogether, it was fairly light on both the horror and the comedy. He seems to be pretty divisive as a writer. The online discourse that I've seen, not to mention the in-person discourse that I've had, people seem to either love him or hate him. I fall mostly in the I don't really care one way or the other camp. He's not terrible, but generally I think he's a little bit below par. Grady Hendrix kind of writes popcorn novels. He isn't a master of prose by any stretch of the imagination. He is fine. He gets the job done fine. His plot is fine. His characters are fine. His prose is fine. And altogether, it just, at least out of the two books I've read of his so far, it's been fine. He's not something that you really want to go taking a deep dive into, because his books don't really seem to be particularly deep. He's very imaginative. He just leaves a lot on the table by the end of his books. There's a lot, he could tie his stuff together a lot more tightly. He could capitalize a lot more on a lot of the ideas that he has. It just doesn't ever fully pull together. Let's go ahead and discuss the plot in the prose here. After her parents' sudden death, Louise Joyner returns to her hometown of Charleston, South Carolina for the funeral. Although she hopes for a quick and painless experience, legal and familial complications keep her in Charleston until the house can be sold, which her brother Mark wishes to do immediately. The only problem is that the house is haunted, full of mischievous, murderous puppets, and bears a darker history than either sibling knew. Louise and Mark inherited a lot more than just a house. They inherited generations of trauma and secrets ready to swallow them whole. Now, it's only after I wrote that little plot synopsis and tried to think of individual scenes in the book that I really kind of realized how contrived the plot is. A lot of the moments in the plot feel somewhat forced. Not entirely. There are good moments that do feel like they naturally lead into each other, but a lot of things just feel very convenient, actually. That's probably the better word. Characters make choices because the plot seems to demand it of them every now and again, and that's usually a problem. This book falls prey to what Roger Ebert, the film critic, would call the idiot plot, in that this book, the plot of the book, would have not happened if people would just stop and talk to each other. Now granted, sometimes that is the story. Sometimes people do just fail to speak to each other. This book is, in a lot of ways, about the failure of communication. However, it wasn't always sold to me, and because he wasn't able to perfectly sell it, usually because of his, I want to say inexperience in prose, but he's several books in now. His lack of nuance in his prose, his lack of just charismatic ability in his prose, leaves it to where I don't buy the idiot plot. Now, it's not that the idiot plot can't work. It can. And especially in comedies, but again, as I said earlier, the comedy didn't really land with me too much in this book, so the idiot plot was not very acceptable to me. The idiot plot aside, there were plenty of moments in this book that in and of themselves were fine, just when finally strung together in the full plot, they felt kind of, loose. They didn't tie together as tightly as they could. It didn't quite feel full and complete. He really should have taken one more whack at it. Grady Hendrix probably, in my opinion, if I had to guess, made the cardinal sin of not putting this book in the trunk for a couple of months. Frankly, the book would have been better if it had another run-through. It needed another round of both narrative editing and actual prose editing, because the prose just felt fairly passive right? You know, definitely a passive voice is fine sometimes as long as you know how and when to use it, and unfortunately there was just a lot of passive voice in this where it really would have benefited the book to be more active. Most books, I think, are overwritten. They should be clipped down and made a little bit shorter. This book, I think, actually would have benefited by having a few more scenes added in, specifically somewhere in the front half to really sell the relationship between the main characters and some of the extended family members. I don't think it would have hurt the pacing or anything if he would have just added a little bit more and get us to actually care about the characters more. I didn't care too much about any of the characters. There were a few that I did, but not many. We'll get to them in a moment, though. I think Grady Hendrix is not a very good novelist, but he probably would be a good scriptwriter. They feel fairly visual, most of his stories, and most of the cerebral stuff that he gives us, which is one of the core elements of literature, most of the cerebral stuff that Grady Hendrix gives us is... I could take it or leave it. As I said earlier, all of these characters that I'm about to discuss do fall into the idiot plot territory. However, that doesn't mean I necessarily disliked any of them by the end of the book. It took me a while to grow into a few of them, but there was none that I just hated. Louise is our protagonist. She's our POV character. We get to see most of everything through her point of view, and she was fine, right? I don't love her, I don't hate her. She's a mother, so almost all of her actions and thoughts and beliefs and motivations stem directly from that. She was neither strong nor weak as a character. She's shown to be like an overachiever because she went to Girl Scouts, did really well in school and stuff like that, got a full ride scholarship through college and everything, and so she's a very dedicated person, but also fairly frantic in some ways. Yeah, I don't know, she's fine. I didn't dislike her, but I also did not particularly like her either. She was fine, and that's about it. Her brother Mark is the other primary character in this book. The book is mostly about the relationship between the two of them. There is definitely extended family in the book, but it's mostly about the relationship between Louise and Mark. Mark is kind of an asshole, or at least he's painted out to be a bit of an asshole by the beginning of the book. I won't go too much into his arc, but it definitely does change who he is by the end of the book. His actions did kind of piss me off, like he treats Louise really shittily at the beginning of the book. Granted, Hendrix tries to play this off and justify why he treats her that way later on, even if it does feel a little iffy to me, a little washy. The justification doesn't feel perfectly well off, but I'm more willing to suspend my disbelief than most other people are, so I was okay with it enough to at least finish reading the novel. The strain on the siblinghood between Mark and Louise is really probably the best part of this book, honestly. There's moments that are fairly tense, there are moments that are fairly dramatic, a few schmaltzy moments and all that, but the best part was honestly just seeing the relationship change between these two siblings throughout the book. So if you're gonna read it, that's probably the reason. The major antagonist of the book is a puppet. His name is Pupkin. I do not like the name Pupkin. Not Pumpkin. I got almost halfway through the book before I realized it was not Pumpkin, it was Pupkin. And I didn't like the name Pumpkin. I like the name Pupkin even less. Having to deal with that the entire book just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. He is a very annoying character. Now granted, he is supposed to be an annoying character, so that is somewhat forgivable. However, I did not particularly like him. It took a really long time for me to warm up to Pupkin at all, and by the end of the book, I could tolerate Pupkin, and that's about it. I really think it would have gone a long way if he would have just changed the name of the puppet to literally, maybe anything. Also, side note about Pupkin, Grady Hendrix definitely described him a couple of times, let me know what he looked like a few times, and not at all, never, not once did I, in my head, actually see Pupkin looking the way that he described Pupkin looking. Hold on one second. That, actually, is what I imagined Pupkin looking like the entire time. Not at all what Pupkin was supposed to look like, but that's what I had in my head. Okay. Oh, goodness. Oh, Spider. Spider was good. I think Spider was my favorite character. I'm not going to say anything about Spider for right now, because we have to hold off for just 2 seconds to the spoilery bit for that, but I liked Spider. The rest of the minor characters in the book were pretty bland, pretty neutral. I honestly don't even remember most of them, and I finished the book not too long ago. There was Aunt Honey, she was fine. There was another aunt, I think Aunt Grace was one of the names. Gail, I think, was like one of the cousins or some shit. And they were all either fine or I didn't care about them. The only one that I actually liked was Barb. And she didn't show up very much. If she would have shown up very much more at all, I actually don't think I would have liked her. She was a very commanding personality whenever she was on the page. But for the little amount that she was, I at least did enjoy her. It was different than the rest of the characters, at least, and I appreciated that. We are now into the spoiler territory, so if you do not want any spoilers, have a good day. Alright, so we can talk about Spider now. I liked Spider. Spider was the coolest thing described in this book, right? Spider is Mark's imaginary friend from when he was a kid. Is an imaginary dog, and it's got 6 legs, and it's like multicolored. Each of its legs were like bright yellow, blue, and red, kind of like the primary colors. And like it could crawl on walls and shit. And the way that I imagined Spider in my mind was really cool. Man, he should have ditched the rest of the book and just written a fucking scary story about Spider, because this book would have been so much cooler, in my opinion. You fuck the puppets, dude. Sure, they tied in thematically to what he was trying to do, but Spider was way cooler, even though he didn't have, thematically very much to do with anything at all. As much as I love Spider, he didn't really belong in this book. It was just kind of strange and mismatched with the rest of the supernatural stuff that happens in here, right? The rest of it is every other creature, right, in this book is effectively every other haunted thing in this book is not... it's a haunted thing. That's it, right? It's not a creature. Spider is spawned from Mark's imagination, right? Whereas everything else in this book is haunted because of the whole Freddy thing, right? It really didn't match up with the rest of the book, but it was still the best part of the book. And unfortunately, that's how I could tell that this book was not particularly well written, because the part that was the best had almost nothing to actually do with the rest of the book. It really did need to be one of the other puppets that filled in the role of what Spider did. That sucks, because Spider was the coolest part. He was my favorite part of the book. He could have just written the whole book about the relationship between Mark and Louise, and Spider was the bad guy, and that would have been so much cooler than what we ended up getting. One last note about Spider. I do like the fact that he was turned around at the end. Grady Hendrix subverted my expectations at the end of the book by having Spider come in and actually help out. I didn't see that one coming. I figured she was going to have to deal with him in some way, and no, that one was a nice subversion of my expectations. Let's talk about the fucking squirrels. Why were the squirrels in the book? We didn't need the squirrels. They were absolutely unnecessary. They should have been, just like Spider, they really should have just been other puppets. Why? Why were they squirrels? Because it was, don't get me wrong, it was kind of silly to watch us. It was silly and a bit funny to watch the squirrels attack Louise, but why couldn't they have been puppets? Why not be puppet squirrels, right? Why do they have to actually be squirrels? Because they don't ever show up again. They don't show up during the climax. They're mentioned a few more times throughout the book, but there was zero reason to actually have those squirrels be there. They were wasted space. They should have been clipped out of the book entirely, honestly. Or he needed to find some reason to actually include them in there. As to how he would do that, I don't know, but personally, I think they needed to be clipped. He really liked him, cool, but man, this is an instance of kill your darlings. I think he just liked the idea, but he didn't know how to fit it in naturally, so it just kind of is there. He said, well, that's good enough, and unfortunately, that's not good enough. And then, another moment that was just, drastically mishandled was Louise getting a needle to the eye, right? Okay, first of all, getting a needle to the eye, sick, nasty, gross, love it. Mentions at one point how, she reflexively is trying to blink, so it's her eyelid is hitting it, and it's just, jiggling around inside her eye, and, oh my god, that part's really good. He does really good at describing that bit. I got pretty goobered out of that part. And then there was no follow-through. There was no follow-through after that. And so it was okay, cool. We're going to stab this woman in the eye and mention that she's probably received eye damage only for that to not at all affect the rest of the story? That was a waste of time, kind of like the fucking squirrels. He should have either A, cut it out, kill your darlings, or B, what I think he should have done in this instance, actually followed the fuck through and had consequences for it, right? Mark got his fucking arm cut off, right? That was something that he actually followed through with in the story, but he didn't have the balls to actually take Louise's eye out. He should have. Like, don't get me wrong, not like I want to particularly be cruel to her, but like, that's good writing. Good writing is sending every possible hurdle that you can at your characters, and hoping that they pull through or they die, right? And unfortunately, he was fine with just having the thing happen and then sweeping it under the rug. He was cool saying it was good enough. And unfortunately, that's not good enough. There really needed to be more horror in this book, or more comedy, right? This book didn't feel particularly like a horror. It didn't feel particularly like a comedy. It felt mostly like slightly above soap opera level melodrama in a lot of instances, with a few moments of horror and a few moments of comedy sprinkled throughout. A lot of great potential for moments in this book, but wow, he squandered a lot of it. So, in conclusion, I'm not super happy with my read that I've gone through here. I didn't hate it, but it left a lot to be desired. A lot to be desired. I figure that Grady Hendrix is going to go down like John Saul or like Bentley Little or a lot of these other, just popcorn horror authors that were, prolific enough in their day, were able to use their writing to live on throughout the day, which is itself respectable. I'm sure that people will probably be rereading his books 20, 30 years from now. However, he's not going to have I suspect he's not going to have the great cult following that some other horror authors do, like Robert McCammon, for instance. Regardless, like I said, he was able to sell enough books to be able to actually make a living. He keeps his lights on with it, so he does deserve at least a small amount of respect. That said, I did not like the book very much, so I'm going to give it a C-. Its overall plot moves along quickly enough, but it lacks urgency, and it occasionally feels a little too convenient. While it tries to balance horror and comedy, it should have leaned heavier into one or the other to truly have any genuine effect. And though all of the characters were perfectly serviceable, none were particularly memorable. Except for the dog. I really, really liked Spider the dog. I would have rated this book higher. I would have. But this is, again, his 7th or 8th book. He's put out a number of books. He's put out some nonfiction. He really should have a better grip on his prose. He should have a better command of the English language at this point, and frankly, it doesn't feel like he grew very much at all from Southern Book Club to this one here. So, overall, I kind of have to give him a C-. He would deserve a C+ if I saw any real, genuine growth as a writer between the two books, but not really. He said good enough. And again, that's not good enough. Am I going to reread this book? No. I'm probably going to move on to his other stuff at some point, because again, he's a fine popcorn read. Between large books, if I ever pick up Moby Dick, I might follow that with a Grady Hendrix, but till then, no, I am not going to reread this. At least I have no intention to reread this. My name is Damien, by the way. I'm an author as well. My debut novel was The Circus, an American fantasy. I also wrote Portraits and Bloodlines, short stories with my father, Rick Foreman. I also wrote 666, or A Play About Stones and How to Carry Them. They're available on my website. You can also find a calendar at the bottom of my website for various events that I'll be at, where I'll be selling used fiction and movies. Swing by if you'd like to talk about books in person. Thanks for being here. Have a good one.